Yeah, I think it's quite true. And I think, I mean, for Ngugi, he has achieved a lot. And even while writing in his native Kikuyu and then being translated into other languages, like he's been winning prizes all over the world. I think there's a time the Catalan people in northern Spain, Barcelona area, like they even gave him a prize. And interestingly enough, I think he also won the Osnabrücker Frieden Prize, the Peace Prize in Osnabrück for literature. I think I'd left Osnabrück at the time, 2019, towards the end. But my guest father was still there, and I remember he sent me something on WhatsApp and he was like, yeah, Ngugi wa Thiong'o is coming and he's going to receive the prize. So I think for him, maybe he was an outlier alongside, of course, many names across the African continent. I mean, you are in literature, so you know them probably much better. Chinua Achebe.
Yeah, Wole
Soyinka.
Yeah, we've had quite a good run, you know, as a continent in terms of producing globally acclaimed writers, Ngugi being one of them. But I look forward to a day in which, when we speak about prizes, we will value more local prizes. You know, we have the Jomo Kenyatta Foundation, we have the Kenya Literature Bureau that will have prizes that are equal in stature to our local contexts. You know, you mentioned Osnabrück and Ngugi's, you know, chase for the Nobel Prize for Literature, which will never come. I hope it does not come. I hope it doesn't win the prize for a reason that we don't have to seek validation elsewhere. We are valid in terms of our own existence.
And in terms of the effort you've already done and what you have already achieved. So you don't necessarily need international validation.
Yeah, we don't need to be legitimized by prizes in Europe or
in other places of the world.
Yeah, so if it doesn't win for me, that's a good thing.
Jumping into the conversation right in, decolonizing African literature. I think that has been a topic over the past 5-6 decades, especially coming out from the independence, post-independence period. Marxists always refer to it as flag independence, like it was not really independence, or maybe political independence, but not economic independence. Anyway, the person I'm thinking about, a literary giant on the continent and even in the world, Ngugi wa Thiong'o. There's a time where I was reading about the huge change or shift that came into the literature department at the University of Nairobi. I think it was in the early 70s, where Ngugi led a group of scholars at the time to push more towards teaching African literature. And that was kind of baptized decolonizing literature. Because up to that point, a lot of literature that had been taught in African universities was basically British or Western literature. What's your take on the legacy of Ngugi wa Thiong'o up till today? And do you think a lot of effort has been made in decolonizing African literature, let's say across the continent, from, let's say, the early 70s, where Ngugi wa Thiong'o led this paradigm shift and change at the University of Nairobi?
Yeah, that's an interesting question there that you posed to me. I have some rather strong opinions about the same. Yeah. Foremost, I'll give Ngugi his flowers as far as the debate on decolonizing the mind is concerned. But I think we also need to understand that, and probably also sort of deviate from this Ngugi as a main character syndrome in abolition of the English department at the University of Nairobi. We need to understand the wider context that, one, this was a sort of a continental-wide wave that was flowing all over the countries that were gaining independence from Britain and other European powers in the continent in the 60s. Ghana, I think, was the first in 1957 to attain independence. Now, what happened in terms of the politics of the day was that the governments of the day, you know, from Ghana, Kenya, wherever, name these black, you know, so-called sub-Saharan countries, they had an administrative need and imperative to have a reflection of self-determination within the ranks of the officers governing the countries. So there was that wide Africanization program that happened across so many countries. And I can speak specifically about Kenya on its Africanization program. You know, you have the likes of Tom Mboya who are championing, you know, filling in the administrative ranks with indigenous, local, black, Kenyan population as officers from junior to senior. This is something that happened from the military and everywhere. Now, when we speak about academia, before I move down to the level of the department within at the University of Nairobi, we had an Africanization program, and this was spearheaded by what many might not know. The historian Bethuel Ogot was in charge of this Africanization program, right?
Yeah.
And this policy sort of was broken down to various units of governance, from the Ministry of Education, the military, health, and so on.
Yeah.
We wanted to encourage much more manpower. So at the level of the university, they were simply, putting into practice what was expected by the political class, that we have Africans, taking charge of African affairs. And this is where Ngugi comes in. So I'm not going to say that it's Ngugi alone who was in charge of this program, as is often reported elsewhere. But I want us to be always conscious of the wider context, that this was an Africanization program, of which UN was but one of the many government departments that were to implement the Africanization program. And at the level of the department, Ngugi wa Thiong'o, Henry Owuor Anyumba, and Taban Liyong were the voices behind the abolition of the English department in favor of the Department of African Literature and Languages. Yes, I think that's something that I wanted to bring first of all tonight, that we don't center Ngugi on the story.
I think what I read was just mentioning Ngugi and that shift. And so I'm not an expert and I've not delved deeply into it.
Yes.
And I think you've really brought it out quite well.
Yeah. Yes, I think that's an important thing that many people do not know. And I'm so glad that I have such a forum to...
And anyway, you have a PhD in cultural studies, literature,
yes,
stuff like that. So
yeah.
this is really your domain.
Yes.
Yeah.